So you come up to the top of your mat. You can keep your feet together. You can keep your feet apart, but start a little bit more loose. So it's not anything stringent. It's not anything overly rigid and aggressive. You think of this as natural. And what does that mean to you? And it doesn't necessarily mean that we can stand just sloppily. But don't be too rigid either. And try to have, if this makes sense, more of a contoured edge around your postures and around your efforts instead of sharp edges. Not to say that sharp edges are useless, but just to start on more of the softer side. And then simply just kind of look down into your feet, and not looking visually, but looking through the inside of your body and through the perception that your skin entails. Can you tell if you're standing a little bit more towards one foot or the other, if you tend to lean on one side? And if that's the case, then just simply balancing out the weight distribution in the feet can actually clean up a lot of other misalignments north of the feet. Make sure your arms and your shoulders feel heavy in a way that you can tell pulls the shoulders down away from your ears, which actually liberates certain structures of the neck. Relax your eyes and relax your forehead. Relax your jaw. Relax your lips. Make sure that you're breathing through your nostrils. And of course, if throughout the practice, or even now, your nostrils feel a little bit clogged and it's hard to breathe through them, then definitely breathe through your mouth. But if you can avoid breathing through your mouth, there's a lot of benefit to breathing through the nose. It really helps to temper the intelligence of breathing, so we're not just sucking air in a sense of survival. We're intelligently metering how much and how quickly the inhales and exhales come through. Okay, so then now bring your feet all the way together. And do this one slowly. So as you start to plug a little bit more effort down into the heels, engage your legs. If you like, you can even kind of feel the front of your thighs with your fingertips just to make sure they're somewhat engaged. And also try to press your legs towards each other. Adduction, adduction towards the midline. Keep more weight on the heels than anywhere else on the feet. And sustaining that effort in your legs, slowly begin to peer open your eyelids. Make sure that your eyelids don't come too far open because that'll overly excite the nervous system. So we have more of an introspective practice, even though it is dynamic. And on the next inhale, go ahead, lift your arms up. And as you exhale, fold your torso down. Again, take it easy on the first fold if you haven't done any practice or any movement yet today. And then inhale, lengthen the torso. And exhale again, fold the torso. And maybe with your eyes no more open than they were in the beginning, inhale, come all the way up to stand so that your arms and your hands come to me right at the top of your inhale. Then exhale, arms come down. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, fold. So one breath per movement. In inhale, draw more length into the torso by engaging the legs. Keep the legs engaged as you fold again. Good. And then last time as you inhale, come all the way up. Try to use your inhale to actually inflate the upright stance of the body. And exhale, arms down. Good. And now we'll go right into it. So as you inhale, lift your arms up to complete our sun salutation. As you exhale, fold carefully and yet generously. Inhale, lengthen, and inhale generously. Really feed your system. And on the exhale, plant your palms and step back to your high push-up. Get a little bit more fortitude in your high push-up, especially good when we start off. And we have this expression that we all understand that first impressions last the longest. And that means really what we do at the beginning of an enterprise, that tends to carry throughout the whole career of the said enterprise. So make sure your arms are forceful and you're actually kind of connecting the tips of your fingers to the ground. Pay explicit attention to your index, middle, and thumb tips. Good. Keep your legs engaged in the same exact way that they were in your upright stance. And on your next exhale, lower down either to low plank. If you need to come to the floor for the first one, feel free. And then inhale, slide forward to upward dog. Again, easy on the first one. And on the exhale, pull your belly button back to return to downward dog again. And then getting into downward dog, immediately relax your neck so that we can start to unburden the habitual mode of operation that our neck is under. And what's the habitual mode of operation? It's just keeping the head upright. And then setting your feet in your hands so that, again, in the beginning, the example that we set with the body carries through the rest of the practice. Make sure that your fingers are spread wide. And watching your feet, because we do have a tendency, or habit, both, to have the feet a little more narrow than necessary, especially in downward dogs. Try to have your feet no closer to each other than the width between the hips. So there should be straight lines that you can see going from the outer hips all the way to the outer heels. Lift your toes and push away from the ground just for the next couple of breaths. Give not so much of a push with your hands like you're sending your chest towards your knees, but imagine you wanted to get more distance from the mat just between the top of your head and the ground. So that kind of a flexing, upward pushing feeling of the arms. And on the next inhale, go ahead, lift the heels up. And exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, and if you like to, you can even hop forward. Inhale, lengthen the torso, keep the thighs robust. Exhale, fold, try to really point your tailbone up, your sitting bones up. And on the next inhale, as you come to stand, use this downward projection of your legs to actually elevate the body. And exhale, arms come back at the sides. Inhale, arms up. And exhale as you fold. Continue that exhale so you really synchronize the movement with the movement of the breath. Inhale, lengthen, and keep lengthening until your inhale ends. Exhale, plant your palms, and on the same exhale, step or jump back and lower right to your low plank. The inhale precedes you forward to upward dog, and the exhale returns us to downward dog. And the sun salutation in just its traditional technical context is a dynamic form of movement. And it's used actually in the beginning to help break up any habitual tensions in the body. But downward dog is more of a static posture. And it's a very good way to interject a little bit more steadiness, a little bit more stillness into the body within an otherwise dynamic flow, a dynamic technique. And so when we stop in downward dog, there's a tendency for the mind to be very mobile or motile, have a lot of motility, a lot of movement. And so when you're in downward dog, try to notice how relaxed or not your face is, and pay attention to whether your eyes are jumping around. So even if your eyes are closed, which is preferable, keep your eyes directed just one single point. So, and I usually err towards the downward gaze. Okay, keep your eyes nice and soft as you inhale, lift the heels. And exhale, bend the knees, walk, step, or hop forward. Nice. Inhale, lengthen the torso, extend your sitting bones back. Exhale, as you fold, extend your sitting bones up. Inhale, your legs plug into the floor and the sitting bones anchor down, which makes the torso lift up. So wherever the torso goes, sitting bones have to go in the opposite direction. Remember this formula. Inhale, chest up, arms up, sitting bones down, engaging the glutes. And now exhale as you fold, You switch to the glute engagement now to make it your quad engagement to point the sitting bones up. And then inhale, lengthen. Exhale, plant your palms. Lower down to your low plank on this very next exhalation. Make sure you get to the root of the exhale. Inhale, come into upward dog. And returning back to downward dog. And again, stillness. And stillness, this word in itself, or even this concept in the world of yoga, has been, well, fairly readily adapted, and not frequently defined or explored. Because what does actual stillness mean? What is stasis? What does that mean when we're looking at a living body, when we're living in a living body, when we're engaging the living body? Because a living entity, any organism, by definition, is one that's in constant flux. So what does it mean to say that we have a pose of stillness if the underlying conditions of an organism is constant motility? On the next inhale, lift the heels up. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, or hop forward. Good, nice soft hop. Inhale, lengthen, extend your chest. Exhale, fold. And again, as you inhale and come up, just drive your sitting bones down, which in turn lifts the chest. Wherever the torso and chest go, sitting bones have to go the opposite. Exhale, arms down. Good. One more like this. Bend. No, sorry. Keep your knees straight. Inhale, lift your arms up. Exhale as you fold. Now aim your sitting bones higher. The more you want to drop the chest, the more you got to lift the sitting bones. And then inhale, lengthen the torso. Keep the chest and ribs broad. Exhale as you plant and step back and lower to your low plank. Still keep the ribs sort of inflated. And inhale, re-inflating them in upward dog. And exhale back to downward dog. Good. Relax your neck, drop the head. And think of it this way. When you're pressing away from the ground with your arms, so now we're kind of switching subjects a little bit to the upper body. When you're pressing away with your arms, the feeling is going to entail a little bit more envelopment of your neck with your shoulders. So the more you press into the ground and the further you lift your head off the ground, the closer to your ears, your shoulders will rise. And that's actually a feeling that you want to start to capitalize on, because that's a shoulder stabilizing effect that will keep the shoulders from falling too far into hyperflexibility and still staying strong enough to keep you supported, to be stable. On the next inhale, lift the heels up. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step or hop forward again. Good. Legs strong. Lift your toes. Inhale. Engage your quads. Exhale. Fold. Start to reach the crown of the head towards the feet. And then as you inhale and come all the way up, just think of it as you're pressing the earth away from you. And that'll be sufficient to lift the body up. Good. A couple of variations on the second variation of sun salutation. Inhale. Bend the knees. Utkatasana. Let's stay here for about 3 breaths. Squeeze your thighs together and transplant about 70-80% of your body's weight to the heels. So it's almost like the front of your feet become insignificant and negligible to your attention right now. On the next exhale, straighten your legs while folding. Still point the sitting bones up. And then inhale, lengthen the torso. Exhale, plant your palms. Proceed on the same exhale to your low plank. Even if you have to hover in low plank to get that last little burst of exhale. And coming back to downward dog, step your right foot forward between the hands and see if you can get your knee just to tap your forehead and your nose before you step through. Doing that will allow you to use your core the way that it needs to be used, and it'll also make for a nice, conscientious, methodical stepping. Back heel stays lifted. Come on up to a vertical position with the trunk. So just our standard high lunge. Can't say enough about high lunges. Just make sure that when you do them, you look for 2 fundamental criteria that you're going to keep training into yourself. One is the vertical setting of the back heel, the back foot, and the other one is the horizontal position of your front thigh. Both of those are not easy to make happen in any single posture. So you have to give yourself time to develop it. When you're ready, lift your arms up. And for the next just 2 breaths, having everything as is, add a little bit more fire to your left glute. And by fire, I mean a little bit more clench. And on the next exhale, bring your hands down. Keep your hands there. Don't move your legs. Lift your right arm up. And so we start with this nice, easier twist. And by easy, it doesn't mean necessarily in terms of effort. By easy, it means easy and not overly demanding on the spine. And by the spine, of course, let's be more specific, not overly demanding on the discs themselves. Good. Now from here, just to make things a little bit more interesting, roll the outer edge of your left foot to the floor, keep your left hand where it is, and start to kind of walk your right foot, and then eventually step it back to side plank. And of course, you can always bring your top foot back behind you like this. Yeah, if balance is an issue, but if you can't keep your legs one on top of each other, that would always be a better way to start to train more hip stability. Just make sure that what your top foot is doing in this case is mimicking exactly what your left foot is doing. So that's to say, toes are lifting and the outer blades of your feet are elevating towards the outer hips. Take one more deep breath in. And then as you exhale, bring your right hand down and lower to your low plank. From where we all know what comes next, the inhale of upward dog and the exhale returning to downward dog, only to now step your left foot forward with a quick little touch of the forehead and the knee before the foot steps through. Get your landing gear out, so your feet and your legs. Make sure you're right with them first, and then come on up. Starting with the hands on the hips, just again to get the receptivity in the feet. And we have to be able to take time because the soles of the feet are one of the richest innervated parts of the body as far as the perception of mechanical forces. So when you feel right in your feet, your back heel is vertical, front thigh is horizontal, then lift your arms up. And just like in downward dog, it's a little easier this time because you don't have to lift the weight of your body. Project the entire chain of your arms up so you can actually start to feel how your shoulders rise up towards the base of the skull, like the cheekbones, the jawbone. Next exhale brings your arms down without any changes to the back leg. Right hand stays where it is, left arm lifts up. And so again, this easy twist, which takes so much just typical pressure off of the lower back. Now you get that freedom, and it's not like the lower back allows for much twisting anyways, because twisting is more of the thoracic spine enterprise. That unburdening of the lower back, it tends to quell any subtle anxiety in the nervous system, because if your body's experiencing some stress and you consciously don't recognize it, you're going to experience that stress subtly, which is going to impede your own progress in the practice itself and your own health. On the next exhale, place your left hand on the hip and then roll the outer edge of your right foot to the ground and then slowly start to step and eventually place your left leg on top of the right leg. Make sure that you notice what your bottom foot, your right foot is doing, and you just replicate that with the top foot. And I want you to pay special attention to the outer edge. And so when you pull, yes, the outer edge of the foot up towards the rest of the leg, that action is called ankle eversion, which connects you to an impeccable stability skill in the hip. One more breath in, and then see if you can tie one exhale to bring your left hand down and lower into your low plank. And then when you get back to downward dog, resume all previous techniques, all previous etiquette. So having the right distance between the hands. In short, what's the right distance between the hands? Well, simply it's to not let the hands be wider apart than your shoulders, and to not let, as far as the legs go, let your feet and heels be more narrow than the hips. And it's usually the opposite of what we see in so many practitioners and unfortunately even certain styles that convey this mode of approach. Good. Next inhale, lift the heels. As you exhale, bend the knees, walk, step or hop forward. Good. Make sure your legs are calibrated as you inhale, lengthen the torso. And on the exhale, fold back down to the depth of your lungs. At the first sign of your inhale, bend the knees for Utkatasana. We started with a couple of breaths in it, so let's finish with a couple of breaths. More weight on the heels. And as you sit back, try to point your sitting bones at this diagonal line back towards the floor. So the angle of the torso continues with the trajectory of those sitting bones. Next exhale, straighten your legs, bring your arms down only. Good. And we'll continue with another little detour. Inhale, bend the knees, Utkatasana. And as you exhale, fold and straighten the legs. Inhale, really lengthen out, broaden out your lungs and ribs. Exhale, plant your palms. Step back, lower to your low plank. Upward dog, take care of the inhale, make it complete. And as you exhale back to downward dog, step your right foot forward. Little quick tap of the head to the knee. And then stepping through, come back up to high lunge. Good. The final part of which is going to have your arms overhead. Perfect. Okay, good. Now, you're going to straighten the front leg on the inhale. Exhale, fold forward. Good. And just take these 2 or so breaths to fold specifically the right side of the torso right on top of the right leg. Keep the back heel lifted for this one. You'll see why in a moment. Get right with your front foot. Notice if you're favoring the outer edge of the foot with more weight or the inner, and have a little bit more balance between them. And now you're going to bend the front knee just a little bit, look out in front of your right toes, and step forward into a hand-supported warrior 3. Right there. Good. Extend your chest away from the pelvis and kick your left heel the other direction. Toes on the left foot point back, and you can always look underneath just to make sure your toes are in the right orientation. But I would always suggest waiting to use your eyes as the last thing. Always get the sense, the physical proprioceptive sense of your body, and confirm with your eyes only if you're not able to get anywhere with that. Okay, so now you're going to bend the bottom knee a little bit, step back to the pose that you just came from. So front leg straight, back heel lifted. You're going to fold down. Good. Now, one hand at a time. Let's start with the right hand. Place your right hand on the hip. Good. Still try to stay kind of deep in your fold so the right chest stays a little more proximate to the right leg. And then finding your balance, keeping your balance, take your left hand to your left hip. Yeah, back heel still stays lifted, both legs straight. Perfect. Slowly stand up. And then pivot your back heel down, turn your torso to the left, keep your front foot where it is, into triangle posture. So extend your arms out to the sides first. And then as you exhale, reach the upper body forward so the shoulder blades go forward and the hips, the whole pelvic line goes back. This right here, the crease of your right hip, is the crease that you want to deepen in order to get a little bit more space and length, especially on the right side of the torso. Good. We're going to take one more breath in this pose. And then as you exhale, place your left hand down, bend your front knee, step your right leg back, and then lower down to low plank. And then proceeding all the way back to downward dog. Again, step your left foot forward, a quick little touch of the knee to the face. A little touch, of course, before you step through. And then coming back up to high lunge, make sure that you really pay attention to your legs. There is a priority, not to say a hierarchy. There is a prioritization that we want to look at when we're doing standing poses. So feet and legs come first, and only when they get right, then we start looking at the rest of the body. So now you're going to inhale, straighten the front leg, keep the front leg straight, exhale, fold forward. Yeah, and if you can manage to actually keep your front toes lifted as you fold down on top of your leg, maybe even stay there, It does take more effort. It obviously makes things so much more, let's be frank, complicated. But that complexity, that complication actually works to our advantage, because that's when we take our body to the edge, or at least closer to that precipice of our ability. And that's when the body actually develops. And just keeping our body only within the purview of what we know and what we're skilled at doesn't actually help it develop any further. So now, look out in front of your left toes and step into hand supported warrior 3. When I say hand supported, what we really mean is fingertip supported. And I want to just encourage you, whenever you have your hands on the ground for any of these standing postures, train yourself to be on your fingertips, because that's going to impart another skill that's important for the wrist. Instead of just slamming your wrist down, you're building up the strength of your finger grip. Make sure your back toes point straight down. Project your chest forward. One more breath. And then step right back into the pose that you just came from, which is that variation of Parsvottanasana. You can keep the back heel down if you like, but otherwise, keeping it lifted is more than enough. Now, one hand at a time, starting with the left. Place your left hand on your left hip. Keep your front leg straight and keep the chest close to the thigh. So stay folded in. Yes. And then see if you can remain that folded and place your right hand on the hip also. Now, on the next inhale, slowly come up. And then turn your body to the right and prepare for triangle pose. Left foot stays facing forward. Extend your arms out to the sides. If you're used to a narrow stance in triangle pose, like say the Ashtanga triangle pose, get a little bit more length between the feet. Keep the front kneecap lifted, and then exhale, reach the torso forward and slide your hips back. Another way to phrase this, as far as what you want to do with the hips, is imagine that you're pushing this right hip out. So kind of projecting this outer hip up towards the ceiling at a diagonal line. It's going to be assisted so much better if you engage the left thigh. Keep your body relaxed. Keep your face relaxed, not your body. And on the next exhale, place your right hand down, step your left leg back, and then slowly move through the rest of your vinyasa. And then we'll have our nice pause in downward dog right after. Good. Again, relax your neck, drop the head, reinforce the arms, because you were working so much with just the legs doing that last variation of the sun salute. Now you can inject a little bit more effort into the arms because they weren't really doing as much work. So feel where within your hands there's a similar effect as that you notice with your feet. Where do you tend to favor more pressure between, just say, the outer palm and the inner palm? The thumb and index finger side of the palm and the pinky side of the palm. And you want to be able to err towards the thumb and index finger side, like that L shape that you can make when extending both fingers. On the next inhale, lift the heels up. Exhale, bend the knees, walk, step, or hop forward. Inhale, lengthen everything. Extend your sitting bones back. Exhale as you fold. Remember, sitting bones go up even higher. And at the first sign of your inhale, start to bend your knees for Utkatasana. Keep more weight saturated in your heels. Squeeze your thighs against each other. One more breath. And then exhale, arms down. Perfect. Separate your feet hips width, hands on the hips. Lift your toes up. Inhale, reach your chest up. Keep your elbows pulled back. And as you exhale, fold forward with your elbows still doing the best that they can to pull back towards each other. And just keep the hands on your hips for a little bit. Make sure that when you see your feet, you don't detect any duck footing. By duck footing, we mean a little bit of external rotation. So neutral or even slightly internally rotated would create better response in what's happening there in the hamstrings and hips. Press your pelvis, your hips, upwards towards the ceiling with your hands, so that in turn you get to project your torso down a little bit more. Okay, now release your hands to the floor. Step back to high plank, and then from there, take another vinyasa. We'll meet back in downward dog. Perfect. Step your right foot forward between the hands, and let's go right into Parsvottanasana, kind of picking up on the previous pose that we had before. Keep the back heel up for this, both legs straight. And again, see how much closer, since you're doing this the second time, you can get this whole right hemisphere of your upper body towards the right leg. And there is a little priority list of what should touch first. So you want to be able to get your lower torso to the front thigh before you touch your chest and before you touch your head. Okay, so keeping the back heel lifted, bring your hands underneath your shoulders and lift your right arm straight up to the ceiling. Now, this can be an awkward position for the shoulder for some of you. So where you can start is, just to show as an example, is you can put your hand palm flat on your lower back so that your fingertips are directed towards the same direction as your tailbone, right? So you can keep your hand there the whole time, and when it feels okay, then you can lift your right arm up. Okay, so that's kind of like this first preliminary version of twisting triangle. Bring the right hand down on the inhale. Come forward back to a hand supported warrior three. And we'll get to see how this skill of the twisting triangle can translate into the following pose, which is twisting balancing half moon. So left hand stays down, right hand can stay on your lower back, or eventually lift the right arm up. But stay on your bottom fingertips, because if you flatten your palm, that's going to force your torso to fold a little bit more, which can make it dangerous for the low back, especially when coupling it with a twist. And then just press away from your left fingertips as if you're catapulting this whole right side of the body, right arms and fingers included too. Good. Now on the next inhale, bring your right hand down and step back to a high lunge, except keep your hands down. So front knee is bent, back leg is straight. Make sure the back foot is vertical, front thigh is horizontal for this. Good. And then left hand stays where it is. Lift your right arm up. So changing the position of the legs and the action of the legs, and then adding a similar twist to each one, you can start to discover how the legs and the hips inform the capacity to twist. And when you have a plurality of leg and hip positions that you're putting a twist on top of, you're actually making your twisting intelligence a little bit more well-fed, a little bit more well-rounded or holistic. Next inhale, bring your right hand down, and then lower your back knee to the mat. Good. Then lift your torso upright. If you need a little padding for your bottom knee, of course, use whatever padding you need. A little piece of mat will always work. Good. And starting with the hands on the hips. So we're going to really start to go a little further in this whole twisting game from here. So I'm going to do it facing the camera. Michelle's going to do it facing in her direction. You're going to place your right hand first, right on your lower belly. So you kind of like find with your thumb, find your belly button, make sure that your hand is below the belly button, right? Now, right along that lower band of your torso, I want you to now place the entire right forearm. So where your hip and your torso meet, or your leg and your torso meet on the right side, that's going to be as low as you can go with your elbow. So basically place your forearm as low as it can get on the torso, or as low as the front leg permits. And your right hand is like wrapping around the whole side. Then you're going to lift your left arm up. And now when you go into the pose, as we do every other time, you're going to fold and twist. What I want you to do with your arm is keep it there. And as you exhale, fold and twist, you're going to pinch your arm between your leg, right? And the pelvis, the belly. Now keeping the left elbow on the thigh, take an inhale, don't go anywhere. And as you exhale, push with your left elbow a little bit more as you slide your right arm out. And you kind of take some of that belly skin with you, because oftentimes, because of clothing, some of our skin gets stuck to some other parts of our skin, and it actually impedes some of the flexibility. So once you get that, you can either go into a prayer position. If you're more fond of the binding, you can go into a bind. But find the dialogue between your front leg and the arm that's on it. And as long as the front leg doesn't waver, you can slowly lift the back knee. And I would highly encourage that when you get the back knee lifted, you don't just assume that you're finished with that. Like, really keep lifting the back leg, keep enhancing and engaging the quality of that lift so it keeps feeding the insight into the rest of your body, because your legs influence how you perceive your torso. Turn your head a little bit further. Let's have like 3, 4, maybe 5 more breaths. Every exhale, if you rotate your head a little bit further, it sort of neurologically programs the spine to get a little bit more flexible in this direction. One more breath out. And on the next inhale, release your hands. There you go. Step your right leg back and take a slow vinyasa. Perfect. Back to downward dog. Nice. Let's step the left foot forward between the hands into Parsvottanasana with the back heel lifted. And again, just fold the left side of the torso right on top of the left leg. Remember that hierarchy, the priority, not the hierarchy, because hierarchy would suggest one thing is more important than another thing, like universally. And that's not the case. Priorities, though, imply that some things are going to be way better functionally if they're preceded by some other things. So when you get to folding, it's like the left side of the belly folds to the leg first, then the left side of the chest, and eventually, if that can happen, then your head can come down. Okay, walk your hands back until your hands are underneath the shoulders. Still keep the back heel lifted. And then twisting triangles. So keep your right hand as is. Place your left hand, if you need to, on your lower back first, or just go ahead and lift your left arm straight up. What you do, though, with the top arm has really nothing to do with the depth of your twist. So let's just be clear about that. Throwing it back behind you is not going to work to your advantage. It can only complicate things for your joint structures in the shoulder. Rather, impressively pressing your right arm down is what's going to help to rotate your spine and not sacrifice stability and safety. Next inhale brings your left hand down. Step forward into a finger supported warrior 3. So just get right with the legs first. Remember, behind the next pose that you're doing, like underneath that twisting, balancing half moon, is this posture. So if you get things right here, they're going to work out that much better for the next one. So when you're ready for it, right hand stays down, left palm can start in the low back, but eventually left arm can also lift. And there's so much happening in this pose that usually what falls into by the wayside is how elevated the back leg is. So everybody press the right heel up towards the ceiling like you're trying to kick it right up in there. Okay, now from here, bring your left hand down, step back to high lunge, hands stay on the mat. Good. And then right hand stays down, left arm goes up again. So basically the same kind of twist as we started with, that other variation of our twisting triangle. Now the legs are kind of changed. So again, by performing these different positions, we're creating different skill sets on the legs. And if your legs have this plurality of skills, then that's going to make the environment of your spine and torso a lot more, like habitable, basically. On the next inhale, bring your left hand down, bring your right knee down. Find some padding for your right knee if you need to. And then we're going to come upright. Good. It's good for stability purposes to start with your front knee above the front ankle and your right knee right below the right hip. Okay, so you got your left leg forward. Now, keeping the right hand on the right hip for now, wrap your elbow and your forearm around the lowest band of your belly, as low as your front thigh will allow your arm to go. You get like a good grip of it. Lift your right arm up. Take a long inhale, and as you exhale, fold and twist. Don't move the left arm yet. Just pinch your arm between your abdomen and your thigh. Now take another inhale. And as you exhale, pushing with the right arm as well, start to slide your left hand out and take any little bit of belly skin that you can with you. And now we're either binding or you have yourself in a prayer position with the hands, but slowly lift the back knee, constantly incorporating the dialogue between your front leg and the arm that's on it. Yeah, and this is great. So you can see Michelle's always lifting the toes. And in a posture like this, lifting the front toes kind of makes a bad situation even worse. It makes something already complicated even that much more complicated. So for the next 4 breaths, never be shy to take yourself just to that next little step, even if it's subtle. How much does it take to really lift the toes? It's not a difficult thing in and of itself, but you add it to this system, and it's almost like a whole different universe. Take one more breath out. On the next inhale, take your hands out, step your left leg back, proceed down to your low plank. Inhale to upward dog, and exhale back to downward dog. Relax your neck, drop your head. Okay, very nice. Let's come down to child's pose. Keep your arms by the sides if you like, or you can keep your arms out in front of you. That's really more of a personal taste preference. It's like some people like green juice more, other people like salad more. And so where you want your arms doesn't really need to say anything about your skills or qualities as a yogi or as a person. So just kind of let this be more of a free form. And that way, even within a guided practice where we have structure, there's still room for you, for the unique, person, human that you are, with its own personal preferences and needs. Now, let's take the arms out in front of us. Still staying in child's pose. And if you need to, separate your thighs a little bit so that your abdomen is not confined by having the legs right underneath it. Okay, so we're going to walk the hands over to the right at first. So we're going to take a side bend. And they don't have to go too far. Just make sure that as you take your body to the right, it doesn't feel like you're particularly closing the right side of the body. You still want to create length on both sides of the torso. Next step is you place your left hand on top of the right hand and interlace the left hand fingers between the fingers of the right hand. All right, so the right palm is open, left fingers are clasping and grabbing it. And there's a difference what you do with each arm. So think about pressing away with your right arm in the same effort and direction as if you're doing downward dog. But with your left hand, you just simply hang on. And of course, you guys will probably feel that there's a pretty good amount of opening happening here, stretch on the left side of the torso. So if you connect an even, say, stronger emphasis of pressing your left sit bone to your left heel, you might accentuate that lengthening even more. Pay attention to exactly how stretchy it feels. And then keep that in mind, keep that memory of this left side of the body right now when you take your hands back to center and proceed to walk them to the left. And once you get side flex to the left, again, remembering not to overly collapse the left side of the body, both hands stay out in front of you. Then place your right hand on top of the left hand and interlace the right hand fingers between the webbing and the fingers of the left hand. So now it's changed around. You're pressing away with your left arm and you're just simply hanging on with the right. And try to find a line of contact from your left arm all the way down to the right sit bone and the way that it presses into your right heel. Holding on with your right arm, feel now the right side of the body and just kind of compare and analyze how it feels between this and the previous side bend, and which one feels a little bit more restricted or a little bit more flexible. And one of the best and most useful things about our yoga practice, or physical yoga practice, is when we start to notice whatever asymmetries we have in the body. Because if we can start to catch asymmetry sooner, that means we can offset injuries sooner. Because injuries to joints really come from one place. One place. Asymmetry of muscular force, asymmetry of effort across the planes of movement that any single body part can live with it. On the next inhale, bring your hands back to center. Walk your hands towards the knees, and then slowly sit up. And then you're going to step actually come forward onto your hands and knees. And then let's go into pigeon pose from here. So bring your right knee forward towards your right hand and your foot towards your left hand or your left hip. Now, how open your knee is, that's going to be obviously up to your level of flexibility, but if you have a block close by, you would take a block and you'd put it underneath your right upper thigh, which will allow, yes, your torso to stay down, or allow your body weight to stay on the right thigh. Keep your front foot engaged. Yep, and then let's come all the way upright. So see if you can actually come back up, place your hands on the hips, and if you don't need the block or you don't need any other support on the right thigh, just be honest with yourself that you can actually ground your body weight on that right leg. Okay, so hands being on the hips. Now engage your left glute. Put your right hand right at the right thigh. So you're using your right arm to push your chest back a little bit. Lift your lower belly up, and then bend your back knee and lift the back foot carefully. It's not going to be easy. And grab your back foot from the inside. So now, while pressing away from your front leg with your right arm, start to pull your left foot in with your left arm, right? And not many people are going to be able to end up in this position. It takes a little bit of time. But as you continuously start to pull your left foot towards your left glute, make sure that you're pushing back with the toes against the hand. So there's little micro actions going on at the foot that don't allow you to go too deep into ankle hyperextension. Take about 2 more breaths here. Good. Now slowly release the left foot first, and then bring your body down, and then come back to the left side. So we'll pick up on the left, bring your left foot, left knee forward to your left hand, foot towards your right hip. And then first, just again, lay down and make sure that your upper left thigh is supported either on the floor or on the block. So as you're staying down now, being honest again, how much body weight you actually feel landing in the left thigh. From there, keep that amount of body weight present and then come upright. Engage your front foot. Never let the front foot toes relax in pigeon poses, ever. Bend your back knee, start to lift the back foot. Grab your foot from the inside. Keep your left hand, you can keep it on the floor just like Michelle has here, but if you place your left hand on your thigh, it actually gives you a closer structure to press against, so it kind of gives you a little bit more of that, that mechanism of staying upright. So as you pull your right heel towards your right glute, try to create a little bit more fire in your right butt. The closer your heel comes to your right hip or glute, the more you have to activate the right toes. So the action is the same as when you stand and lift your toes. And then for the last 3 breaths here or so, if you've noticed your pelvis has started to kind of veer off to the right slightly, try to pull the right side of the pelvis forward so as to get back to more of a neutral in terms of rotation. Last breath out there. Good. And then slowly release. And then come back to child's pose. Okay. And then slowly walk your hands towards the legs. Come up from child's pose. Okay. Now let's finish this off with a little bit of reclining hero, a little bit more psoas and quadricep work. So you can start with a block. You want to make sure that the block is right between your ankles. So if I turn around, you can see the block frames, the ankles frame the block from the outside. Okay. In order to be safer on the knees, make sure your knees start together. And then before you sit, grab your calves. And you see how my palms are facing down, and I'm kind of sticking my fingertips right into the knee crease from the back. So you do that and try to feel the very top aspects of your calves. And there's a good reason for that. So once you feel that, I want you to actually grab your calf and notice, for instance, if your calf is relaxed. If it's flexed, it's not going to have much pliability. So you want to be able to press your toenails down, press your shins down, and then as you carefully sit back onto the block, start to drag the calves with your fingertips away from the knees. Not to the sides, but drag the calves down towards the heels until you're actually sitting. So at this point, you're actually going to pinch your hand between your upper and lower leg. That's great. That's what we want. You're going to slide your hands out one at a time in that backward sliding direction. So it sustains the space that you've created between the top of the calf and your knee. And you're going to kind of lean over to the left hip, step your right foot forward. So we're going to do the single leg hero, which is a good way, again, to start to understand where we're lacking a little bit more flexibility on which side of the body. You're going to lean back onto the hands. Make sure when you lean back, don't let your fingers face backwards. Always have your fingers face forward. That's just more shoulder stability. And pressing with your hands, you don't have to lift your butt high. Just lift it enough so you can posteriorly tilt the pelvis, which means point your sitting bones that way, forward. And then you'll land a higher part of your glutes down, and you might be able to bring yourself to the elbows. And if you can get to the elbows, perform that same adjustment. Lift the pelvis ever so slightly enough to pull your tailbone, your sitting bones forward, and therefore land on an even higher part of your glutes on that block. If your left eye is floating off the ground and you can't get it down, then this is going to be the limit of where you stay. Just work to get your left shin pressed into the floor. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, the next step will entail sliding the block out from underneath your glutes and then carefully waging your descent all the way down to the shoulders, all the way down to the spine without the left eye lifting. And so wherever you are, wherever the deepest end range of this pose is for you, make sure that you can feel the active pressure of your toenails on the left foot. So you want to dig your toenails into the floor. That's going to keep neurological protection on the structures of your ankle and your knee, and more on the ankle than just the knee. Because we are taking our ankle to such an extreme plantar flexed position that we want to animate some of the musculature of the ankle that will protect those joint structures from suffering too much flexibility and too much stretch, because we never ever want to stretch passive joint structures like ligaments, tendons, joint capsules. That stuff should never be put on stretch. What we're explicitly stretching is the muscles, is muscle tissue. Let's see where and how your face is at this point, depending on the amount of tension you're experiencing on the left leg. The jaw can be quite dense, quite rigid. And so if that was the case, can you notice some symmetry between when you relaxed your jaw and what that ended up feeling like in your left leg, in your left quadricep, and your left hip, the anterior hip? Good. Let's finish this last exhale and come out of this slowly. You know, they say like 40% of yoga injuries happen when people come out of a pose. So let's not be a statistic. Keep your toenails pressing into the floor, one elbow at a time. Come up, or then from your elbows to your hands, keep your left toenails pressing. And then from your hands, you're going to come right into all fours. And then just extend your left leg back. Keep your left leg straight for about 2 or 3 breaths, just so you get to engage all the muscles for a little bit that you were just stretching. And that just kind of flushes some newly oxygenated blood through it. Okay, and let's go to the next side. Fortunately, our last side. So you're going to place the block between your ankles. Before you sit, do the same thing. Grab your calves, and as you sit, make sure you're pressing your toenails down and pulling your calves in the direction of the heels until you're actually sitting. And then slide your hands out one at a time backwards. So it takes that calf structure with it. Now, we're going to do this on the right leg. So you're going to lean over to the right hip, step your left foot forward. Good. And again, for anybody that can't really sit this deep, if your knee can't bend this far, you can prop yourself up on something higher, 2 blocks, even 3 blocks. So once you get here, lean back onto the hands, lift your pelvis, perform the adjustment, that posterior tilt adjustment, aim your sitting bones towards the knee, and bring a higher portion of your butt to the block. From there, come down to 1 elbow at a time, perhaps. Again, perform the same adjustment, lift your pelvis, rotate it, and try to get a higher part of the pelvis down. And if you want to go a little bit further from there, as long as your right thigh isn't floating or doesn't end up floating, take the block out from underneath, land your butt first, and then come down to your shoulders and to your back. Now, it's not going to be easy, especially if you're all the way down, to lift your head and look at how the angle of your right thigh is placed with respect to the rest of your body. So make sure that you use your right hand and just kind of feel the angle of your right thigh. And if it feels like your right thigh is steering or veering off to the right a little bit, bring it back to center. So you always want to make sure that you never let the knee be more lateral than the hip. It can be in line with the hip and it can be medial to the hip in this pose, but never more lateral. Continue feeling, exerting the pressure of the toenails on the right foot into the floor. Unlock the jaw, keep your eyes easy. And one great thing about ending the practice with opening up / stretching / releasing these elements of the front of the body, so the elements that usually get a little bit closed, the front of the hip flexors, the quadricep part of that whole hip flexor line, which actually helps us also get more expanse and space into the abdomen in the front, which in turn helps us get more space and girth into the chest, the anterior portion of the torso as a whole. Ending our practice with that really makes for this architectural redesigning of how our body is usually used in everyday life, which is more or less the opposite of what this pose entails. So we come out of our class, we end our class with creating a structure that invites inhale, that invites a better respiratory ability. Because if our respiration falters due to any other life stresses, then everything else in our body, every system, every other part of our metabolism and chemical exchange that really starts to dwindle when the respiratory system dwindles. And your respiration is like the meta system of all systems. It's the conductor of the orchestra, so to say. Keep the toes nailed. Come up slowly from your back to your elbows. Keep the toenails pressing from your elbows to your hands, and then from your hands forward onto all fours. And then extend your right leg back behind you. Get a nice full straightening in the knee. Perfect. And then lay down on your back. And you can get a blanket out, or if you have something like a towel to put under your head to give you a little lift, and also something to put over the eyes when you rest. So as far as putting something underneath your head before you're fully wrapped into your Shavasana, all that's really necessary is that the head is a little higher than the rest of the back of the body. And an even more finer tune point on that is the little bit of a booster seat that you create for your head. When you relax your neck, should create a condition that feels like it's passively nodding your head for you. It's not like a big nod. It's not aggressive. You don't need to place your chin onto the sternoclavicular joint right at the top. It's just so you have a little bit more length on the back of your neck than what you usually do. Unless, of course, you tuck your chin all day long. Then you want to do the opposite. Make sure also that your head is straight. Oftentimes people will lay down with the head slightly rotated or even slightly tilted. So just get very perfect. And I know that's a charged and very loaded word, but if you strive for perfection, that's different than assuming perfection. So we strive to perfection knowing that perhaps we'll never actually get there, which means that we set the bar higher than we can ever reach it. Because the opposite is if you set the bar where you can reach it, then what happens when you do reach it? Then you have nothing else to strive for or work for. So we set the bar high and we just work throughout our whole life to try to meet those criteria. And then as far as your eyes, make sure you try to cover the entire eye socket space to remove any potential of light coming in and disturbing your visual system. Let everything grow roots into the floor. Let everything be ultra dense, ultra heavy. And this is the place that the appreciation for our yoga practice and our commitment to coming yet again can really start to emerge. Stay in Shavasana as long as you like if you have the time for it. We want to be able to leave with those qualities of Shavasana when we actually are done resting or turning over and walking back into the rest of our day. So when you get to that place of deep, fulfilling enjoyment in the rest, think about hitting the record button so you impress into your memory what that state is. And memory is a big part of our practice. It's actually one of the canonical movements of the mind that are stipulated in yoga philosophy. Smriti, to remember, memory. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to share. Have an amazing rest of your rest. Make sure you hydrate well after you're done. And may your Shavasana be with you eternally.